Professor Annim also indicated the country does not seem to have a firm grip of the economy. He explains that capital flight has become more than inflows and such variables are hurting the economy.
So the discussion on capital flight always requires a context. The reason why it's important is we have two types of it. One that is purely legal. Somebody is in the country, does business, and the person would want to invest their resources elsewhere. And the other is the illegal part, which is mainly as a result of illicit financial flows. So it's pretty difficult to measure capital flight. But the emphasis of today's lecture was tracking the extent of capital flight and over time making a case whether we can see a downward trend in capital flight. So today I demonstrated the extent to which it's a challenge. For instance, in 2010 it was about 20.8 of our GDP, and broadly the argument that I put forward is that it's very volatile, which means that there are instances where it's positive and quite a high positive and instances where it is negative. So the volatility sort of limits our ability to plan with capital flight. It means we cannot even predict the tax returns that we get from the profits that expatriates makes on businesses in the country.
Let's bring in Chief Finance Officer at the Valley View University, Dr. Prof, to get some perspective on the issues raised by the government statistician. Good afternoon to you, Dr. Prof. Is there any way we can check price variation of commodities on the market? I've heard some suggest we introduce a price control regime, but the finance minister has said that that is not an option.
Good afternoon, Daryl, for calling me. So on the issue that has been raised by the government statistician on the issue of price disparities within the country, whereas the finance minister is not ready for us to move into price control, which is a mechanism normally applied when the country is experiencing high inflation. An important element that we can use to control this effect is information, making sure that there is information asymmetry or balance of information spread through all the country on commodities. So, for instance, can we have all the radio stations, some of them doing their business profiles, be putting the prices of commodities across markets for citizens to know the price of, let's say, rice, a bag of rice at Medina, a bag of rice at Kumasi Central Market, a bag of rice maybe in Tamale, and the rest. So once citizens are aware of this information, it will slow down the intermediaries who are highly profiting from this issue, whereby we have some form of, we all have a clean knowledge of how prices should be. But to address this issue of high prices is what we have to go into and look at the fundamentals, which we have always been talking about it. So, as mentioned, our inflation situation is an important inflation factor. So the first one is the price that we get our goods from outside the country. And the second factor is the exchange rate of which these foreign goods are exchanged into Ghana cedis. So that is where we should address it from, so that we'll be able to have prices variation. So the example the statistician gave in Cape Coast, yes, it can happen that at 3 outlets, prices will be different because they will be coming from different suppliers from different countries, and maybe these sellers bought their items at different prices. So they are trying to adjust to make sure that they don't lose money. So that is why this is happening. But as I've mentioned, if government is able to use the media, the communication team, to try to come out with prices of commodities across the country, it will help. Not only relying on the SOCO and the rest, maybe Joy FM will also sometimes come out with, or multimedia, to come out with commodity prices for goods outside the country. Now, probably your attention should be also on markets within the country, so that prices will always be the same. Citizens need to know how much a bag of rice is sold in Medina, and they can make a decision whether they will have to move from maybe Tema to come and buy it from Medina because the price is cheaper. Well, it will it will force other markets to make sure that the prices are the same.
We've started something like that with our shopping list, Joy Business shopping list. But I want to move on and talk about the government statistician also raising issues with capital flight. Huge money outflow, which he says is hurting the economy. How much of a problem is this?
Thank you very much. So I think the government statistician was a little bit careful. Instead of giving us the monetary value, he gave us the percentage. 20%. So yeah. I'll just go by giving the monetary value. So in 2021, it was $11.6 billion in terms of capital flight. That is how much the amount of money that left the country. So it left because, one, it may be investors are repatriating their dividends out of the country. And normally when investors are repatriating their dividend out of the country, you give a signal that they are not prepared to reinvest within the country, so they are moving their profit out. And which is a major issue that government must have to address. Like when you go to South Africa, they have a plan and a strategy on how multinationals will have to transfer dividend out of the country. Then you are able to control your country's economy. Also, when you see that there is manipulation of currencies, you always experience capital flight. I'm just saying it as a signal. So remember, about 2-3 years ago, it was said that the city we have arrested the dollar or the movement of currency. And you ask yourself, what has happened now that there's a sharp increase or devaluing of our cedi? If you are an investor and a foreign investor, you would think that probably there is manipulation of the currency in the country. So the economy, in the terms of microeconomic sense, is not very stable. So you want to move your currency out of the country. Also, another factor is when you see that there is political instability. When we talk of political instability, it's not just war, but also what happened during the parliament section in the approving of the budget points to a political instability. Indeed, we are experiencing political instability because government cannot use its numbers in the parliament house to push its way through. So you will see that government will have to struggle. And if you are an investor and you see that the government in power is struggling to get its policy accepted by members of the parliament house, then you will see that there is that kind of political instability. Okay. So these are the factors, the main factors that are seen in the books, and that is government, a country like Ghana, we are seeing it and it's causing it. And the major factor, as I've mentioned, is also when you see that corruption is also a factor in the country, you will see a high rate of capital flight. So we saw Ghana as a country, our rating dropped when the corruption index was released. So these are the signals. So if government wants to work at these things, we need to address these factors. And then I'm sure that it will slow down the capital flight or money being sent out of the country.
Okay. And earlier we had a discussion on high interest rates and the impact on the business community. But you say it is a good opportunity to save and invest. We have just about a minute. Tell us about that.
So the strategy, what happens to inflation is that it means more money chasing less goods. So if a country wants to stop it, you have to make sure that you produce more goods. But if you see Ghana, we are not a producing country. So we may have to find a way to move the money in the hands of citizens into another venture to make sure that we control the economy. The next option is to encourage savings. So now we know that treasury bill rate is going up. So this is the time for you to go into savings. You will see that all the banks, well, as we are discussing, are now no more interested in giving money to companies or businesses, but they are going to channel their money into savings. So if even a bank has gone into investing in government bonds or government instrument, how much more citizens? So we need to reduce our expenditure and then encourage more savings and to reverse the impact or the inflation that we are experiencing in the country.
All right, Dr. Williams-Peprah, good to speak with you this afternoon, Chief Finance Officer at the Valley View University. I appreciate your insight.